Hey, what's up, guys? Anthony Testino, co-host Focused on Fins with my boy Eric Smith. You guys know me on Twitter at Tino9322. Yep, so today what this is the breakdown that you guys all requested by popular demand on Twitter. It's a spotlight, breakdown, tape session, whatever you want to call it, like I said, on Dolphins' new cornerback, Daryl Baker. Spent last year with the Titans, and plenty of snaps, plenty of experience. I didn't know who he was when Miami signed him, and for me, that's a little bit of a red flag, just because I do take pride in kind of knowing the landscape of the NFL. But here we'll kick it off with a little bit of information and background on Daryl Baker. We'll play both sides, primary, boundary corner. 6'1", 190, so that's nice size. That's prototype size. 27 years old, 4 years experience in the NFL, so he'll be entering his 5th year with Miami this season. In his career, 0 turnovers, no picks, no forced fumbles. He's got 19 passes defensed, and he was undrafted out of Georgia Southern, which surprised me a little bit for somebody that has the snap counts that he does. I would have personally thought, somebody that's undrafted, if he's got that many snap counts, then he's kind of made it, like, good player, right? Whereas, for somebody that's undrafted and has, not to spoil anything, but the film that he has, I wouldn't think they would have lasted this long in the NFL. Like, I look at him and I'm kind of thinking, like, and relating him to Jeff Okudah. Jeff Okudah is somebody that was drafted in the top 10 and just continues to kind of find work, 1-year contracts. And I feel like he's strictly living off of his draft status, where, again, Daryl Baker being undrafted does not have that luxury. So I'm sitting here asking myself, why does he continue to get job opportunities? Well, the size, for one. He ran a 4.43. His vert is 41.5 inches, and his broad is 11.4. The vert and the broad are in the 99th percentile, meaning he is a very rare, explosive athlete. And I would assume when you can get cheap labor like him with those traits, who checks those boxes, if a coach looks at his tape and says, everything that's wrong with this dude is coachable, whether it's IQ, technique, those kinds of things, I don't blame a coach for saying, you know what, let's get him in the building. It's not going to cost us very much. Specifically speaking for Miami, like, look at the situation we're in. We can definitely afford to take some swings, and we need cheap labor. Let's get him in. Let's get our, let's get eyes on him. Let's get our hands on him and figure out, let's see what we can make of this guy, right? Let's see if the light bulb comes on and we can get the best out of this guy, because I don't think we've seen that yet. So again, from that perspective, I get it. So yeah, that's a little bit of who Daryl Baker is. He also comes from what I understand, a little bit of a military background, military family upbringing. So I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that he is probably a fantastic worker. And again, that will get you places in the NFL, because not everybody is. Being an undrafted guy, he also kind of has no choice. But he's done very well for himself to be undrafted, and again, to have the tape that he has and, some of the statistics. For him to be sticking around 4 years and now entering his 5th and already locked up on a roster, very well done, again, by him. So, he's doing something right. So, again, what I did is basically compiled every snap and rep that I thought was relevant of talking about, to kind of explain and show who he is as a player. And, we're going to go through that. Some plays you'll just watch. Some plays I will slow down and talk about. But yeah, you're going to see pretty much a long movie of who Daryl Baker is and what his 2025 season looked like with the Titans, and hopefully after, you have a better understanding of who and what he is, and can make your own, conclusions. And then, you're also kind of prepared for what 2026 Daryl Baker may bring in Miami. And then therefore you can set your own expectations. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Again, appreciate you guys for checking it out. I hope you enjoy. Let's get to it. Fins up. Okay, guys. So here we go. This is going to start out with a play that I actually shared on Twitter, just to highlight something that I think he does fairly well, which is his click and close ability. Really shows off like that, electric explosiveness that he has, where the broad jump and the vertical come in is like how quickly what he sees and processes transfers down to his feet, and then how quickly again how he can stick his foot in the ground and then close in on a target, right? And you'll see it here, like when McConkey snaps off his route and runs the in here. I mean, it's almost simultaneous, like the way Baker plays it. That's very good. That's something that every corner does at least fairly well. They are usually the best athletes on the field, with the fact that they have to cover these awesome athletes that are receivers, yet they have to start out backward and have no idea what direction they're going to go. So they have to kind of use anticipation skills, IQ, maybe predict the routes and things based on what other routes are in the area, what the formation is, tape watching, anything that they can use to gain knowledge and get an idea of what maybe is coming is helpful. But again, it still does come down to a lot of athletic ability. And like I said, again, boom, I mean, again, it's almost simultaneous. He does that very well. There's a bunch of reps like that, then, and they're all kind of different, each of them for different reasons. The problem is that he doesn't do this consistently. He just does it well, like when he does it well, right? Like another player maybe doesn't have, the explosiveness to close that quickly. Even if they timed up when they trigger downhill at the same time as he does, he really does like close that gap, when he decides to go. I mean, this is a ball and this is a play where Herbert is looking in the area and he does want to go that direction. And I think maybe the linebacker here, as he drops a little bit into that window, I think maybe that has something to do with it, but also, Bake kind of closing in on that. I think he does a good job. I do, however, think, if he wanted to, Herbert could probably fit that ball in there. And then you would just hope that Bake can maybe, play scrappy and work through the hands and, put a decent lick on him from behind. Pause. And, make the play. But overall, again, I wanted to highlight, like, that's some of the athleticism, that's some of the the explosiveness that his testing numbers, like that, there it is on the field, right? So all right, now on the flip side of things, one, he definitely looks for opportunities to use that to his advantage. So when a receiver, makes a one cut, move on a route, whether it's an in, a slant, an out, something like that, again, like that's when he can use that skill to burst and close the speed and try to reduce separation. The problem is if there's a secondary move, which, you get that there, and he bid on it, and again, he's hoping that it's the out because then he can use that quick trigger that he has, but obviously that's not what happened here. And, another issue of his is playing the ball in the air, especially when he's getting tested vertically. Vertical routes are definitely, not something that, Daryl Baker looks forward to, right? So just want to see it again, let it play. Eyes in the backfield a little bit, right? He got greedy, and you end up giving one up. So here we are now, bottom of the screen. Now, there's going to be two plays here back to back, and that is the only time that I'm really showing his like tackling in kind of the open field, and it sums up kind of what kind of tackler he is. Not necessarily a guy I think that loves contact and wants to tackle. So again, I didn't show too much, just understand it's not exactly a strong suit of his, and he would much rather kind of just be in the way and let other guys, finish and complete the job there. Pittman hits and rolls off, and like I said, just not very good from a technique or getting the job done standpoint at all. Same thing here, like just, I don't know, like a kind of throws a club at the ball sort of, but it's in a way it looks kind of like half-assed, like please don't hit me. So yeah, again, just not a very quality tackler there. Here he's going to get Stefon Diggs one-on-one on the outside. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just a quick slant that Diggs is running and gets inside, completed catch. But again, that can really be done on anybody. He's given him enough cushion where if you snap that off early enough and the ball's put in the right spot, that's just normal NFL play. So nothing crazy to see there. Here he is, top of the screen. And he can get beat up a little bit on these. Again, I've said verticals and stuff, but even like the back shoulders and fades. Right here, you'll get it from another angle. Again, I'd like to see him a little bit tighter, a little bit of space there. Right, he's watching Diggs' eyes. Diggs with the late hands, so Bake doesn't exactly know when to start looking for the ball and when to play the ball and play the hands. Little late, catch, steps out of bounds, plays over. Don't really have an opportunity there to make a play unless you were to kind of, turn your head and find it, which again, he does not do very well as far as finding the ball in the air. So we'll go back, watch the quick slant. And then we'll go back to the fade here, right? So one-on-one. It's a good ball too. There's not much he could have done if he was going to use that technique. Diggs is a savvy, receiver. Route running, late hands, those are the things that kind of hide, when the ball is coming, and doesn't really give Baker an opportunity to do anything unless Baker were to turn and find the ball. This is why I really can't stand when corners just don't turn and look for it. It's one of my pet peeves personally, but I know that it's taught that way. So here we go here, top of the screen. He's got Alec Pierce on him. See, even here, I didn't think this is a bad rep, and, at the end of it, he gets a little help from the linebacker inside right here, right, gets in the way. Pierce has got to kind of maneuver around him, like if you're, trying to gauge what you think that play looks like. If Pierce is going to, run the dig and run, complete the route and keep it going across the field, like what does that look like? But again, like I said, he gets a little help there. But my issue here is kind of the beginning of the play, and he loses a lot of reps within the first few steps. Right, so he's here, he's square, doesn't really look like he's, shaded inside or outside. I don't like his feet immediately. Like, he's got that right foot looks like it wanted to do something, and it was in the air, and it went like forward and then backward. Like I think his feet are a problem. See that foot? That right foot, it almost looks like, he wanted to like step forward, and then Pierce, faked like he was going outside, but then took his release to the inside, and it fooled Bake, and then he's like off balance there. And again, like, this isn't a bad rep, so he recovered. It didn't hurt him, but as we go on here, you'll see some of that where he's unbalanced. His feet are bad. He doesn't open quick enough, or, when he does open, you don't necessarily see the same explosion as if he was in a back pedal and then to go forward. I think that's that's where he's very different, right? If he's playing off and it's in front of him, he can, click and close and shoot forward very quickly. Like, that's where you see those explosive numbers come in. But where he doesn't is when he's kind of got to go backwards. To me, it's like, I think he's like terrified of being up close in press. I really do. So here he is at the bottom of the screen, matched up with Pierce. And again, just thinks Pierce is going outside. Pierce gives him a move, gets inside. And this isn't one of the worst ones, but I mean, if you look, we're at the 50-yard line, and that is where Pierce stacks him. This started at the 35, roughly, is where this rep kind of begins. Outside move. Seems like his feet are a little jittery there. So now they're parallel roughly at the 42, so about 6-7 yards or so, and Pierce is even with him. Now Pierce is obviously, headed vertical. He is facing the way he's going. Baker is still in the process of opening up and turning and going. And then, this is pretty much stacked here, so between that, it took about 10, 11, maybe 12 yards, and then, 15 to get really comfortably stacked there. And again, ball's overthrown, but if this was on the money, that's a big chunk play. And again, this is something that shows up on tape quite a bit. So, I think honestly, again, I had said that there are things that the measurables are things that that you like, and you want to coach him up. You have to really hide him and put him in a, advantageous position, in order for him to not hurt you. And that means, like, I think he's got to play zone and he's got to play off. And you pretty much are going to allow, a team to dink and dunk and kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts out there if you, were to stick him on one side of the field. And then I think you have to play with a safety over the top. Otherwise, you're asking for trouble. So here we are again, next rep. He's top of the screen with his back toward the sideline, which means, he's trying to protect sideline here, trying to give the quarterback a different look. He turns back, squares, but again, opens back up where now, he wants to keep the receiver to the inside. He wants to protect the sideline. Turn, run, he's turning and running. This is a pretty good rep. Like, that's not bad coverage. The issue is that, when we finally got down, to the point where the ball's in the air, he doesn't do very much, and obviously doesn't do enough to knock the ball out. He allows Pierce to gain position, keep him on his back, box him out. And, Pierce with the body catch, he basically just vacuumed the ball in. He didn't try to catch it away from his body and allow Baker to use his hands to try to separate ball from hands or anything. So again, like, you look at it and say he's right there. He stayed with him, and Pierce is a burner. But the bottom line is that, bigger target, he's got to do a better job of kind of, finding the ball in the air, figuring out a way to be physical and scrappy enough to, get a hand in there. And he just can't be so, look so small in reps like that. Here, you got him top of the screen. This ends up being a little bit of a scramble drill. And what bothers me is right there, he turns his head to kind of take a look. Like, it kind of looks like, Downs wasn't really running a route where he expected, the ball on the fade, right? If we go here and kind of look at the way it's ran in the body language. Little move, but okay, I'm running, not really expecting the fade. Daniel Jones is looking left. Bake is with him in phase, not bad. Now Bake starts to turn his head here, and this is where Downs shakes him. And again, thankfully there's pressure here, but if Daniel Jones could have just kind of slowly drifted and when he was ready, stuck his foot in the ground and then drove it. Like that's open in the NFL. That's probably a touchdown. So again, just an instance where I want him to play to the whistle. I don't want him to lose focus or get nonchalant on a play and kind of release his assignment, right? So again, same thing, then loses them. So just little things like that, again, didn't hurt him, but something that again kind of showed up on tape a little bit is like, hey, you're allowed to take a peek, but do me a favor, get hands on the receiver. And if he's going to run this route and put himself so pinched and close to the sideline, then right about here, like, block him off. You know what I mean? Like, step in front of that, where then you're kind of trapping him, and you're not really giving him the ability to gain that separation and work this way. He can't go to the sideline anymore. There's no space there. You know what I mean? So for me, like I said, I think he can play that better and smarter. Now here, I think we have him top of the screen again, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, up here, playing off and outside here. And this is one where he kind of gets lost in zone. I'm really not sure what he's doing here, because if you look, what we have is single high safety here. He's to the outside, especially with the way he was kind of lined up pre-snap. Like with that back foot a little bit further back, that's kind of him saying, like, I could open this way and then have my back to the sideline. And with the single high safety and kind of the same thing going on down here, to me, this looks like it's a cover 3 of some sort. And again, I'm not sure what he sees or why he bites so far inside. His eyes are down here. He's trying to watch. Seems like he's looking at crossers. But again, where are you going? And then now you just let Keenan run right past you. And I mean, you literally have 2 guys now in your zone, and you're in the middle of the field. I don't know what you're doing here. No, then it turns into, oh boy mode, and overruns Keenan, allowing for, some yak there. So again, just really bad overall, focus on, the attention to detail there. Like, what are you doing? What's your job responsibility? And then obviously the tackling effort is, it's not a good rep. So here, we'll go back and I'll let it play just completely. Again, so inside. His eyes are just locked in the backfield. He's kind of just drifting, where if he, maintained focus on, the routes that were coming his way, he would have been prepared and could have turned and ran with him. And realistically, probably could have had a pick, or, Herbert would have had to have settled for the underneath route. Okay, so moving on now. This is the next rep, and, to me, this actually is one of his better ones, especially against Quentin Johnston, who kind of beat him up a little bit, I think. So here, we're down in the low red zone, 10-yard line. QJ puts a move on him, gets inside release, but he's pretty much with him and in phase the whole time. He's got hands on him. He's being physical. He can feel the receiver, which means, if Quentin Johnston's speed changes or he decides that he's going to, make a move or anything, like when your hands are on a receiver, you can kind of feel that. And then your feet, can match what you believe is coming, right, based on feel. Like, if you think about face guarding somebody in basketball, when you're trying to not touch them, it's very difficult. But if your hands are on them, you can kind of feel like the moves coming, right, because everything is kind of generated like from the core. And, once those moves begin, you kind of have an indication and a head start on where they're going. So being always having physical contact with the receivers is something that, corners should be doing. So again, we'll watch it here. QJ puts on an outside move, takes an inside release. We got good contact with him. Hand switch. He's got the outside. He's got the inside arm free if the ball were to show up here, where he could leap and extend and use that inside hand to knock it away. QJ kind of starts to pull away from him here. Overall, it was a difficult throw, and Bake, did a good job of not making it easy. So again, that's one of his better reps that I saw. I liked that. So here he is now, next one, bottom of the screen, playing off. And this is where he's actually going to cover McConkey on a drag. Again, he realizes McConkey's taking off inside, and this is what I'm talking about, right? These are the reps that, he doesn't have to turn and open or do anything going backwards, really. It's a mini back pedal, and then he realizes McConkey's moving inside, so then he's going to just turn and chase. And he gets a pass break up here. Now, if we're being honest, Herbert could have put this ball in a little bit of a better spot. He did, he helped Baker out with the location of this football. He threw it behind McConkey, and, you can see McConkey's got to slow down, try to reach for it, and Bake's right there. Bottom line is that, when you're a corner and you get those, you take them, and, you chalk it up as a pass defense. It's a good play. That's a good play for him. Next rep. This is one where we'll get another look at it from the other angle shortly, but I wanted to show this here because here, you have a back shoulder fade basically, and he's in phase. I mean, he's not trailing. They're both, they are literally right next to each other. The issue is that he doesn't do very well, again, when he has to turn, like, almost at any time, whether it's here in this, flipping his hips and dropping either foot and turning and going. He loses something there. I think some of the, like, spatial coordination is not there. And, Quentin Johnston uses his momentum a little bit. This is why back shoulders are so difficult to guard, is because, you have their momentum and you kind of know the ball is coming, so you can throttle it down and kind of be calculated in your feet. And when you're going to, kind of post up and go get it, where a corner, is expecting, hey, he's going vertical, I got to go, right? So they don't have that luxury of kind of knowing when to slow down. And then when you get a hand on a guy and you can kind of use his momentum to kind of keep him going and push him a little bit, and it's not like a push where it's offensive pass interference, it's just savviness. Like, hey, if your momentum's going that way, I don't have to give you much to really just send you a whole nother, like, extra, like, 2 yards away. Like, it really does make that much of a difference when, guys are moving at the speeds that they're moving at. And again, he lands it. It's an ugly rep. It's an ugly ending or whatnot. But, it just kind of highlighting that when the ball is in the air and, he has to kind of turn, those are not really his strengths. Here, he's actually up in press, which is another one that I don't love him in. He's got some good reps out of press, but I think he's got more bad reps out of press. So here you'll see him, right? Look at the hands. The hands are kind of out and ready. He's square, and he wants to push, and he wants to jam, QJ. But Quentin Johnston, fakes an outside release, gets inside, gets his hands off of him, doesn't allow Baker to get into his chest. And look, the separation immediately. This is why I was talking about, he loses a lot of reps, like right at the beginning of the, of the route. And this ball ends up going over here to McConkey, but bottom line is QJ is running wide open. I think if Herbert, could have waited an extra second, he would have found Quentin Johnston wide open. So got a little lucky there, but again, it's, we're trying to calculate what we think he is, and figure out what he does do, what he can't do, and how to deploy him, in Miami. And, again, I'm trying to paint the picture here, and I've kind of made up my mind what I believe, that kind of stuff, and we'll touch into that a little bit, at the end. But yeah, just some really ugly, untrustworthy stuff here. So that's that same play, from a second ago. just the other angle here, right? So you get Quentin Johnson with a little bit of, hesitation move. We're good. We're in phase. And then, like I said, the back shoulders are very difficult. But as you can tell, like you just would like to see a little bit more coordination there. I feel like, from a corner. But this is where he struggles, man. This is an undrafted guy that's, going on his, third or fourth team already. And this is why I said that, I'm a little surprised that he's gotten as much, run as he has. And I really think it's probably because he's a really hard worker, and those explosive, measurements and scores are enough to intrigue somebody. But then you turn this on, and, again, if a coach thinks they can fix him and coach him up and solve some of this, more power to you. Go for it. But I have a hard time seeing some of this and thinking that, that he can really be anything more than a special teamer, kind of fighting for his life, his NFL life, basically, at the end of a roster and end of a depth chart. So here, just another route, doesn't get tested, but I wanted to show it. This is him in off, playing a little bit of an outside leverage. And to me, just, his feet kind of, again, get away from him a little bit, where, when, I think this is Ty Felton, when he, when he breaks outside and puts a move on him at the top of his route, he ends up getting Baker's momentum to go inside, and then now he's reaching, and, just another one where, again, you'd like to see better technique. Here he is again. We got him bottom of the screen now. He's matched up on Nico Collins. And this is, there's nothing crazy to this. But the bottom line is, when you look, that's third down and, 5 or 6. And they're attacking Baker here. So he's playing, looks like to me, basically straight up, maybe a little bit outside leverage, up and press. Nico kind of pushes vertical as if he was going to go up top, stops on a dime, and with a big body, target and a good ball placement, it's a tough cover. I can't beat him up too much for like that kind of rep. He's right there. It's just, that's Stroud and Nico being on the same page and a lot of practice, right? So, you got to pick and choose your battles with what you use and what you believe to either, say a guy's good or knock a guy. So here we go. He's down here, and Xavier Hutchinson is actually going to go inside here in the C gap, and he's going to run his route that way and up and over the top. And Baker is the one that's in charge of covering him, and he gets a little bit caught on the guy next to him, and he ends up trailing behind and gets beat over the top there. So again, another one where, I'd like to see better, but at the same time too, that's a little different situation, and he's got a guy kind of in his way, sort of, and that's why Houston ran it, right? They're looking for things like that. They want to cause, miscommunications and, some chaos and guys that bump into each other or whatnot and shake their guys free. And, they do a good job of this as well. But, yeah, you get to see that. And then he's turning and chasing, and easy money, for Stroud. You get to see it here from this angle. Gets a little caught up. Great ball. Beautiful. All right, moving on. All right, so next rep we got, he's bottom of the screen here, matched up again with Nico. And to me, like, I don't know, man. He just looks like he's slightly off balance. Like he wants to stay down. He opens up there. And this isn't bad coverage. I mean, this ends up being decent. Nico creates the separation at the top of the route, which obviously is a losing rep for Baker. But, to there, I didn't think he was bad. He's trying to be physical. Nico just kind of out-muscles him and uses that, that inside arm to help shake free. And then those extra little steps, though, that, he needs to throttle down and stop. That's what hurts him here. Right, so we'll look at it again. Actually, you know what? This time we'll let it play. Those little steps, he's gotta find a way to cut out. And if he's more balanced, and he's can even kind of use some physicality there and almost like lean with Nico. He can kind of use Nico to help slow himself down. And instead, like I said, Nico just kind of out-muscles him with the one arm, and you can see him kind of asking for the push-off there. But it's not bad enough, man. Especially at those top receivers that are 6'3", 6'4", they're going to do that, man. They're going to bully you a little bit. You got to be tough. Your next rep. So this is kind of, one of those that, from the beginning where we're talking about, he recognizes where the receiver is, hitting the top of his route and then breaking. And again, he times it up pretty well. It's just in this situation, there's a little bit too much cushion. And my thing is that, I do see it on this side as well. So I'm wondering, if maybe down and distance had a part to play in that, or, are they giving some freedom to say, hey, play the cushion at your own risk, and he's just not super comfortable because he is so afraid of getting beat vertically. But bottom line is no matter what and how quickly, you can anticipate that break and then you can react to it, if you're not close enough, there's just only so much ground, a human can make up. And, there you go. You got 20 yards on a dig. So, you see the athletic ability, you see the explosion, but bottom line is not all the time does it translate to a good play either. Here he is up top. This is Jaden Higgins, who I think is going to be a pretty good football player. But, this is what I'm talking about. Again, losing a rep within the first, couple yards, first few steps. I just wonder why he's so slow to turn. And out of the gate, he's just slow. He's down here in a balanced, straight up, technique position. And he's playing, looks like to me, with a little bit of inside leverage. It's sometimes tough to tell. The tape only gives you so many angles, and you can't tell all the time. And they don't give you an angle that is like directly behind a receiver or anything where you could see, where he's matched up and where he's lined up. But I believe it's a little bit inside. And here, it's the feet. It's just he's not prepared to turn and go, and he's slow to do it. Right there, he's like this rep is lost right there. Yeah, so from a technique standpoint, a coach looks at that, maybe says, hey, maybe we can improve some footwork stuff there, and maybe that's that'll eliminate some of the big plays and the issues that this guy has. Yeah, just overall, again, like if he gets tested vertically, it's usually the advantage to the receiver. So here we go, next rep. Now he's bottom of the screen. And this he does pretty well. Hutchinson kind of puts on a little bit of a shake there at the beginning of the route. But he's with him. And he looks comfortable the whole time. He looks like he's in, good position, and he's prepared for, what's coming here. Get back to this one. Get some hands on there. Stays with him. He's in phase. Now it looks like he's kind of turning and trying to find the football. He's in good position. There's not a ton of, room to work with over here. It's kind of a tight spot to put the ball. Overall, he ends up making a good play. Those are the positives that you get. There are good reps. It's just like I said, they're just too far spaced out, and then the bad ones are just real bad. They far outweigh, An incompletion there doesn't make up for, a 40-yard catch and, a receiver hanging 6 catches for $120 on you, and it just happens, it just happens too often, the bad plays. So right here, you get Nico with kind of sizing him up and setting him up. Looks like he's maybe going to go outside release. Bake still square. And then all it takes is Nico just, one step to get inside, and immediately, the rep is over. Now the ball didn't go that way, so again, we've seen him get lucky a few times here with that. Again, back pedal, trying to stay locked in, and then there, for whatever reason, it's just like he loses balance. Or he overcommits with his feet, and then he's leaning back towards Nico, trying to turn and play catch up. And by that time, it's 2 yards of separation. If that ball's out there, that's a win for Houston. Here we go, bottom of the screen. He's playing off a little bit. This is one thing that the Dolphins kind of annoyed me with last year, was the fact that guys just never got their hands on receivers to delay routes and try to mess up timing, with the opposing team's quarterbacks and receivers. And here he's got his back to the sideline. He knows he's kind of sitting in an underneath zone. Nico takes off inside release. Like here, this is a very lazy effort. This is like, a lunge in a way to just get a hand on him. And it's like, dude, if you actually tried to go get a hand and push a little bit, they're not going to get you at 6-7 yards for getting a hand on some guy and pushing him a little bit. They'll throw the illegal contact further down the field, and sometimes you'll get ticky-tack stuff at 5 or 6 yards, but it all depends on how it looks. What you did there was it's just not good enough. It's not a good enough effort for me. And, I'll show you why. That ball is beautifully thrown. It's layered over the top of Baker in front of the safety. But with how close of a call that was to the sideline, right? They used every square inch and had had perfect timing there to complete that ball. And my thing is that, if you would have gotten some hands on Nico, or even just kind of gotten in his way and made him do anything to change his route, except for the free release that he basically got, that ball's probably not complete, because the timing was so perfect on the catch, and the catch was difficult to begin with, that if you did anything to mess with it or delay it or change it, it's probably not caught. So for me, again, and that'll show up on tape again when we as we keep going here, but for me, just something that bothers me. It's something that the Dolphins didn't do, well enough, I thought, last year. And, adding a guy that looks like he consistently, does it too, and just joining the party, it just bothers me. You're not helping out your teammates when you do that. So here he is, bottom of the screen. See, and that's him playing, forward. He's not turning and having to go. He's not, in press. He's not really being tested vertically. These are the reps that, he looks decent on, right? He's kind of moving inside. He knows he's going to end up on Cup. Cup snaps it off, breaks inside. He does it, and again, he's quick enough when there's not, a cushion that's too large to make up. Like, he can get there. And again, that ball is actually thrown pretty damn well. That's fairly on target, and he does a good job technique-wise of getting, the inside hand in front to knock it away. Does a great job there. Again, it's, if you're noticing, there's a trend here. If he can go forward, some of the stuff isn't so bad. But if he's, playing the guessing game about which way a receiver is going to release, and it's vertical and he's got to turn and run, that's where he gets himself in trouble. Here, not tested, but again, just kind of like that downs play, right? Where it's like, don't fall asleep on your route. Started peeking at the quarterback, and all of a sudden he's gone. Again, it's got safety help, not a big deal, but just little things, little tidbits you can find and pick up on. Here, I think he does a good job partially and a bad job in another way, where, if you look here, look at this coverage versus this coverage over here. Now, much bigger, gap and separation here in the zone, where this gets snapped off. And if Darnold wanted to go here and put the ball out here, there's no way that he's going to make a play on that. That's going to be a very easy first down. There's the sticks right there. What he does do well here is notice that there's a vertical coming and it's crossing, the post is going to end up heading towards his zone and his deep third responsibility, and he recognizes it and he ends up in good position. Problem is, the ball skills are kind of ugly. It's tough to kind of flip and catch the ball. I know, it's one of the more difficult things to do in football is, with the ball coming over your back and then you having to change, your whole just like equilibrium, to get yourself kind of settled again and then find the football and catch it. It's very difficult. You guys remember, it's kind of like Tyreek, the bomb from Tua, I think, against Washington, where Tyreek thought it was going to be over left shoulder and it was over, further to the right. So then he had to flip over and track it, and he made a hell of a catch and made it look a hell of a lot easier than it is, man. It's one of the more difficult things to do. But the bottom line is you get an opportunity like this, man. This is a guy with 0 career picks, and, he had one there. He had a lollipop and kind of let the opportunity go to waste. So here, he's bottom of the screen. He's matched up a little outside leverage. It looks like, his inside foot looks like maybe it's lined up here on Shaheed's outside foot. Does a good job. Gets 2 hands on him there. Stays square. Again, this is a pretty good rep. If the ball was thrown there, I think he was in good position, to make a play on it and defend it. Here he is, bottom of the screen. That's not bad either. Looks like he's, he knows he's got help over the top, so he's playing trail technique. This also looks like a situation where, he's going to take any out breaking routes. He's going to take any inside breaking routes. And then the fact that they both go vertical and they switch release, it's just kind of, okay, well, I'll take that guy. Makes sense. We're not going to cross and try to chase anybody. And he does that, and again, he's playing underneath that. He doesn't care if he gets beat over the top here because he knows he's got safety help. So again, when he knows he's got help, that, probably settles him down a little bit, where, when he's just playing a third and he's got really nobody over the top, that's where, again, he gets in trouble, and we've seen that multiple times. Here's another rep where he's playing against Parker Washington, who had a damn good year this past season. Turns and just runs with him, fairly simple, but he does a good job there. That's, again, he's not having to turn, and go backward, in a back pedal and transfer from a back pedal to running full speed. Just, that's not his strength. And here, again, the ball is a little behind as well. You look where it's ending up. But again, listen, he got the pass breakup. It's incomplete. We'll take it as a victory. Another solid rep. Here's another one of those in breakers, right, where we've seen multiple times, and again, like, he reacts well. Like, the reaction speed is good. The anticipation of that it's coming, I think these are the ones he's looking for, and that's why he plays them well. But still, there's still just too much cushion there, where it's easy. This is a huge window and an easy throw, easy catch. He's there just too late to really make a play on the ball and try to knock it out. By the time he's making contact with Jacoby, Jacoby's got this thing locked up. So just one more look at it from this angle. Yeah, and he's there. It's just he's not in proper position because he's playing too far away. Here's a rep here where I thought this was a damn good rep. I mean, this is one of his better ones where he's getting tested vertically, right? And it's because he didn't get off balance or, shook at the line here, right? Like he's playing this, looks like maybe a little bit outside leverage. Brian Thomas Jr. takes an outside release though. He turns. Looks like right there he made a choice where he wanted to get his hands and do something with them, but then decided no, not to. And I think that was a better choice rather than try to lean or lunge, right? See the hands go up. He says no. Let me just turn and run. And now Brian Thomas Jr. kind of getting to the sideline and not getting back on top. He's doing him a little bit of a favor, but also Bake does a good job of kind of keeping him there and pinching him to the sideline. And I mean, this is over as soon as Brian Thomas Jr. steps out of bounds. He can no longer be the first guy to touch the ball, right? So that's a winning rep. That's a great rep. I'd like to see that, more. Issue is not all the time does he get, the boundary side, and can he use the sideline? Sometimes these receivers have a little bit more space to work with, and they have a little bit of inside outside release leeway to how they want to win vertically and then try to stack. And that's, again, another spot where he ends up in trouble. Here, kind of, another vertical route. And I know it's tough where he's cut off up here. This is how I had to watch it as well. Whoever the Cleveland camera guy was slipping on this play. Opens up, and it's like, there's a little bit of hesitation there. Backpedal. But overall, not bad. I mean, he doesn't get stacked. That ball's put in a pretty good spot. He's just, again, he's got to do a better job of finding a way to, make play on the ball. I haven't really seen him like turn, run, and then even elevate for the ball, right? It just seems like he's always running. His feet are always on the floor, where you got to get up sometimes and go try to knock that thing away. If you're not going to play through the hands and, and rip the ball out and separate the receiver's hands, then, you got to find a way to make a play on the ball. And there's just, again, not enough reps where he does that. Here, this is a tough one. Again, another rep that gets lost very quickly. He's got Judy on him, who, say what you want about Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Judy's got some damn good feet, and he's a pretty good route runner. But here, he's got the left foot up, so it looks like he wants to drop this foot, right? And he's trying to make the receiver go outside. And Jerry gives him what he wants. I think he gets a little relaxed there, right? With Jerry Jeudy looks like he wants to take an outside release. So Bake is thinking, I got what I'm getting what I want. Overplays it. Jeudy puts the brakes on, slaps his hand away. Bake's momentum carries him away, and now Jeudy is wide open, and a good ball lets him get off to the races. Again, so I mean, just, another rep that's lost very, very early. Within the first few steps, he's toast. 2, 3, I mean, less than 5 steps. And I mean, the separation was already created, and Jeudy had won. Here he is, top of the screen, inside release. We end up getting a good result, but I really think the receiver did him a favor there with the extra move, where if they had just kind of taken off, he could have beat him. Like here, you've already won. Just get on top and stack and keep going. But this like inside, rocker step move that he wants to try to do, and then to get back outside, and then the ball's a little underthrown. It helps Bake, but again, I still don't think that that's like the cleanest or best rep from Baker. Here we go, next one. This is another situation where, again, we're not going to get hands on a receiver. We're going to give him free release. I don't like it, and you're not helping out your safety here. And that simple. Where again, if you had really taken advantage of the 5 yards that you have to do this, you could have really tried to push Juwan Jennings inside here and slowed that route down. And, by that time, maybe the pass rush gets home, and Purdy moves off of that because he doesn't like how long it's taking Jennings to get to where he expects him to be. You're also kind of helping out and slowing down momentum and speed, from Jennings, where maybe he's got to build that back up, which allows your safety to match him a little bit better. But instead, again, to me, it's a lazy play, and it turns into, it's an easy touchdown. Here's another inside breaking route from Pearsall. And this isn't bad coverage, but, again, another one where it's just he doesn't find a way to knock the ball out, and it ends up being a completion. He's in off coverage here, giving him about 8-9 yards of cushion. Pearsall's route starts to kind of bring it inside. Then there's one step where he's making sure that he can get around this guy here, this defender, back outside, and then now he's going to stick his foot in the ground and cut. And again, this is good coverage. There's nothing wrong. He's there. If it's a good ball, and Pearsall I'd like, but again, you're a corner. You have to find a way to knock these balls down, knock these balls out. Again, rake through the hands, separate the ball from the player. And there's just, again, to repeat myself again, there's just not enough of it. All right, so again, another catch there. Here he is, kind of the same deal, off coverage, outside leverage. And you can kind of tell because the way his body position is and which foot he's got up. And then this is kind of where, I think he can get in trouble a little bit too against bigger receivers. Like you've seen Nico kind of push him around a little bit. Quentin Johnston kind of doing the same, and here Juwan Jennings is going to push vertically, create some contact, and then boom, all of a sudden you have this much separation, and creates a nice big throwing window and target for Brock. And again, he's late to get there, and it's just a little too easy for wide receiver and quarterback combo there to complete that one. Here's another one similar to the Cortland Sutton play where, again, he is anticipating and he wants these one-cut routes in front of him where he can just go forward and, play his game. But you get a rocker step here from Olave, and he overcommits, and by then it's, toast. You got 5 yards of separation, and, now he's in chase mode, so... Again, a lot of the issues, they're repetitive. They show up on tape multiple times, which is not good because obviously we're not learning from our mistakes here. And keep in mind, all of this, is in his 4th year. So some of these things, I would expect from a younger player, that's kind of just maybe, in over his head or whatnot. But this is from a guy that with a lot of snaps under his belt. You would think some of this stuff, he would say, okay, I'm done doing that. And, but who knows? Maybe he's not getting proper coaching, or whatever. We're going to get a closer look in Miami, so we'll see. This is going to be the last rep here against Brian Thomas Jr. And he's up here in press. Doesn't try to press, though. He's just up tight. Thomas puts on a move, inside release, and if you guys have been watching Jalen Waddle, that he's damn good at this, is taking an inside release to run an out-breaking route. I'm not sure that there's too many guys that do it better than Waddle, but that's something that's difficult to do. So it's kind of an advantageous route and plan, for a corner to cover. And, again, Brian Thomas Jr. being a little bit bigger, probably a little bit stronger, can use that. We're at the top of the route here. He's starting to slow down, is dropping his weight, and Baker's a little slower to do so, and it's those extra steps that it takes for him to slow down, along with, Brian Thomas Jr. using some of his, size and strength to kind of create some space by maybe, some nudges and push-offs and savvy things that receivers do to create that separation at the top of the route. And again, Bake ends up just, for where he was when they both started to drop their weight, even if Baker was a little bit late, just it's too much separation that you allow. Like you're with him right there. You're with him, and then all of a sudden that's a lot of separation. It's too much there, and it ends up being a little bit too easy. So, that's a look at Daryl Baker, 2025, right? So, yeah, obviously, at that point you can make your own call as to what you think he is. But, I don't necessarily have high hopes. I think he's just a guy. And again, like I've told you, I think he's done very well for himself. I applaud him for finding so many opportunities and snaps for a guy that has this kind of tape. I don't think he's anywhere near the level of Jason Marshall or Juju Brents or, anybody that, Miami's potentially going to bring in, the first 3 rounds of this draft in the cornerback room. I just think he's a guy, and if you were to, maybe get the absolute best out of him, maybe he could be a gunner on special teams because he does have the athletic traits, and then maybe he could be like your 4th or 5th boundary corner on a very, very cheap contract, but you have to play with help over the top and put a safety over him. You don't want him in cover 3s or man, and with no help over the top where somebody can try to, get vertical and get on top of him because, we've seen it here. Like those are the ones that he loses a lot, but again, we'll see. I mean, everything that you see looks like it's from a feet issue where it's balance, it's technique or, whatnot, where, maybe he hasn't taken to the coaches that he's had so far, but again, I'm not saying that that's the case. And I don't believe that to be the case. What I am saying is that we're going to find out, So, yeah, that's Daryl Baker. Let me know what you guys think. I'd be happy to, continue the conversation and elaborate on anything that you guys saw. So, appreciate you guys as always checking it out. And, all right, catch you guys later. Fins up.